the Navy, one of the great things about being in the military is you don't ever have to worry about what you're going to wear because the Navy tells you every day what you're going to wear. So when I got elected, the first couple of times that we went to campaign things and I go to dress myself and my wife looks at me and she says, "You're not leaving the house like that, are you?" "No, ma'am, I'm not." So from that point forward, she communicates with Jonathan about what my calendar is and makes sure that I don't walk out of the house in a way that's going to embarrass her. So guys, thank you very much for coming out. A fairly small crowd, but even if there was one person who wanted to have a voice in this redistricting and was denied that, then that's one too many. So I thank everybody for taking the time to come out and talk through the redistricting process. For those that don't know, my name is Doug Underhill. I'm the County Commissioner for District 2. I live on Perdido Key. And when this issue first came up, we're required by law to look at redistricting and make sure that our districts are balanced. At the very minimum, we have to look at that following the census. Okay, so we had the census took place in 2020. We now have the information that shows that people have moved around a little bit in Escambia County. Things have changed quite a bit in Escambia County. What those numbers show is that Districts 1 and 5, and nobody needs to tell you this up here, but basically the Beulah area has exploded with growth, and so has North County. So Districts 1 and 5 had grown to the point that they're getting close to outside where the balance between the largest district and the smallest district requires some attention. Okay, they are not so far out that it absolutely requires us to do a redistricting right now. Okay, so we are not outside of the law with our current plan or our current districts, which are the first page on the handouts that you have, and also up here on the board. But just because you're not required to, I felt like it was still it's our job. We need to look at it. We need to balance it. Now, the census data came in fairly late this year because of COVID. We're all tired of because of COVID. The answer to everything that you can't buy at a store right now is, well, because of COVID. So the numbers came in late, but they didn't come in so late that we couldn't still do this. Okay. So I pushed very strongly for us to go ahead and complete our duty to look at the districts and balance them. When we first brought this up, the idea was floated of pulling Perdido Key into District 1. And everybody laughed about it because it was laughable. It didn't make any sense, and there's nobody logically would think that that was a good idea. And at the town hall that we just had out at Innerarity last night, lots of folks agreed with that principle. So the very first meeting that we had on this, I've always said I'll never apologize for always putting my kids first. My oldest son is a professional jet ski racer. Yes, that's a thing. And he was racing at the world finals of his sport. Okay, I'll always be there every year that I possibly can. So I missed the first meeting, and somehow in that first meeting with me absent, we went from it was a laughable idea to it became the proposal that the board had. Now, the only argument that I've ever heard for pulling Perdido in to District 1 is that's the way it was 20 years ago. Well, I tell you what, if we had the ability to go back and redo things that were 20 years ago, I think a lot of us would certainly agree that'd be a good idea. But the reality is that Escambia County is nothing like it was 20 years ago. Not even remotely like it was 20 years ago. Perdido Key at that time was in a building boom, and at that time Beulah had not yet started this situation that you're in now. Beulah's not my home, so I'm not going to pass judgment on the way it is, but I know that when this happened to us in Perdido, we lost our quality of life. We lost the quality of life that had brought us there when the condo towers started going up and the beaches started getting closed. So my heart goes out to Beulah, and I do desperately pray that you guys really hold the county accountable for the infrastructure. And I'll tell you, the promise that was made to us in Perdido, which some of us believed and now regret, that all the tax revenue off of this growth is going to pay for all kinds of new infrastructure. Well, let me tell you how it worked for us. We got the growth, we didn't get the infrastructure. And the new tax revenue never really materialized in terms of new investment in the community. So I hope and pray that that is not what's happening to Beulah, but I can tell you that from my perspective on the Board of County Commissioners, and my perspective as a Perdido resident who watched it happen to us, man, it looks awful familiar. So we could probably lament that all night, but I know that's not what you came out here for. The proposal that the board has put in front of you today, in my opinion, weakens representation for the Beulah area, and it also weakens representation for the Perdido Key area. Okay? The Perdido Key area has a massive burden of environmental concerns. We have a federal law that requires us to behave in a very specific way on that island. And you may have heard about the Perdido Key beach mouse. A lot of people laugh about it, but I guarantee you the federal government does not laugh about it. And the consequences of messing that up are pretty substantial. The commissioner that is responsible for that has a huge responsibility to spend a lot of time and energy on that. The commissioner from your area needs to be very, very focused on making sure that Beulah doesn't get the same raw deal of development without infrastructure that we got down in Perdido. Okay? To put both of these communities, which have radically different equities, into the same voter block is going to make it very hard for you to have a selection at the ballot box that isn't just some guy telling you whatever you want to hear and going to be ultimately unable to deliver. Okay? A Board of County Commissioners or any other board like that needs to be a deliberative board, a board where you argue about stuff. Anytime somebody says, well, government needs to get along, the only thing government will ever agree on is spending your money. So be careful what you ask for, because a government that gets along is going to make sure everybody gets what they want and it's all paid for by your dollars. So there should be some push and pull. And the commissioner from the Beulah area should be fighting very hard to make sure that you curtail the development in such a way that enables smart development without destroying the quality of life. You can't keep stuffing more and more of something in here and without changing who you are, changing the makeup of your community. That's what they told us they could do at Perdido, and guess what? It changed our community. Condo tower after condo tower going up, non-resident owner after non-resident owner. Okay? And while, hey, they're great patriots, great Americans, just like all the rest of us, the community that you live in is the one you're going to care about the most. So I would submit that having a situation like this in which one commissioner is expected to be able to meet all of the equities of the Perdido area as well as meeting all of the equities of the Beulah area, there's just not that many hours in a day, folks. There's not that many hours in a day. It's already hard enough. I'll tell you, my district, Perdido Key, has the highest per capita income of any district, any precinct in the 3-county area. Okay? Also in my district, I have census tracts that make up a precinct that has the lowest per capita income, almost the lowest per capita income in Escambia County. Okay? Just balancing the equities of those two and everything in between is a huge challenge. Guys, you do not want a future in which Beulah's county commissioner is anything less than 100% focused on what's happening to your community right now and is willing to fight for the equities of Beulah downtown. By the time the 10 years that pass, if we pass something this year, which I hope and pray we will not, but if we pass something this year, it goes into effect, it's for 10 years. Okay? At the end of that 10 years, you may very well have more citizens living in the greater Beulah area than you do in the city of Pensacola. Think about what that will look like. And recognize that if we don't start to curtail those developments and start to ensure that we're looking at the overall impact of those developments, not just development by development, but overall, you're going to lose your quality of life. Your quality of life and your quality of place, and those are two terms that weren't even in my vocabulary 20 years ago. But when we did the Perdido Key Master Plan, those terms came into my vocabulary and I really got to understand them. Quality of life is one thing. We think about that in terms of being able to put food on the table primarily. But quality of place is just how you feel when you're at home. And if it doesn't feel like home anymore, then would you really call that progress? Okay? So what we could have done, what I believe we should have done, had we not entered politics into this, we knew that we had more people in District 1 and District 5 than we had in the past. And so these were starting to get close to the limit where they were inordinately large compared to the other districts. Simply moving some of these outlying precincts, and I can assure you just about everybody out here in Precinct 95, they've been saying for a long time, why am I in District 1 when I live out in Perdido? Okay? All of their equities, they go to church in Perdido, they go to school in Perdido, their traffic issues are very different than yours. All of their equities are Perdido-centric. Okay? So we knew that this needed to be addressed, and we knew that we needed to address some things up in District 5. You know, we've got this outlying precinct right here that's below the highway, and that precinct is actually outlying and is there because at the time this was done a decade ago, there was an incumbent that lived in that precinct. And so we ended up drawing this map based on where the incumbent lived at the time. Okay? So this takes us to another thing that we, in our decision today, when we made up this map, we factored in where the incumbents live. Here's a newsflash about us incumbents. It's not my seat. It's not my seat. It's not Jeff's seat. It's not Commissioner Barry's seat. The seat belongs to the people, and we're just temporary stewards of that seat. Okay? So when you go drawing a map that's going to last 10 years, you absolutely should not consider where the incumbents are, because that incumbent ain't going to be here in 10 years. Okay? So here's the thing. But the power of incumbency is already too strong, right? It's already hard enough to beat an incumbent because they've got awesome name recognition. Why would we draw our maps in a way that further protects an incumbent and further makes it hard for somebody from the community to step up and challenge that incumbent? It's a wrong-headed approach, and yet that's one of the core decisions that led to this map. Now, the Florida Association of Counties will tell you that it's important that we take into consideration where the incumbents are. Okay, but who is the Florida Association of Counties? It's all the county commissioners from the 67 counties. In other words, it's the incumbents. So it seems fairly logical that they would think that where the incumbent lives matters. I don't think it does, because these positions were never meant to be lifetime positions. I don't think commissioners should get any benefits after the day we leave, right? You shouldn't get a retirement plan for being in office. That's kind of silly. I don't think we would need to have term limits if there was no retirement plan, because you'd eventually have to go back to your job and go back to earning money, right? So very wrong-headed to start with the idea that where the incumbent lives needs to be protected when we start drawing neighborhoods. So if not where the incumbent lives, what should we be focused on? We should be focused on neighborhoods. Okay? Neighborhoods, whether you're black or white or rich or poor, if you live in Beulah, you're suffering the same problems. Same thing goes for Perdido Key, same thing goes for Myrtle Grove or anywhere else. Okay? So keeping neighborhoods together and keeping voter blocks and equities together prevents your county commissioner from being spread all over the place where he's got to make a whole bunch of promises to get into office, but he can stay focused on the areas that matter the most. Okay? But that's not the most wrong-headed thing that we did. The worst thing that we did in the process of creating this map, and the process of creating this map, and in the process of creating the one 10 years before that, is we started from the principle that we must protect the majority-minority district. Now, what does that mean? We've got a district, District 3, that has to be a majority of minorities. Okay? Why do we have to do that? Well, there was a court case in 1984, it's called McMillan versus Escambia County, where they determined that because of the way the map was drawn, it made it impossible for a black person to win a seat. Okay? The judge in that case ruled that we had to have a majority-minority district. This ruling is why, as it stands now, you only get to vote on one commissioner, even though all 5 of us spend your money and make decisions to impact your life. Okay? Now, I have to wonder, would things have been different for Beulah, particularly with regard to the OLF 8 issue, if every single commissioner up there had to answer to you as a voter? I think it probably would. So that has disenfranchised every single voter in Escambia County because the judge ruled that way in 1984. Now, 1984 was a long time ago. I didn't have a driver's license yet in 1984. Okay? I'm now 52 years old. A lot has changed since then. Does racism still exist? Sure, absolutely. Nobody's going to debate that. Okay? But since then, we've had a black president. We've got people of every imaginable stripe in 4-star generals, 4-star admirals, positions of power in corporations, in academia. We are a very different society than we were in 1984. More importantly, when we do the census now, and you either check a black family or a white family or a Hispanic family, that needs to be a check all that apply question now, because mixed families, which might have been very rare in '84, are very common now. So this idea of splitting our districts up to ensure that there's a predominantly minority district certainly seems kind of wrong-headed now. I've got 18 and 21-year-old boys, and they both are like, that's just dumb. Why would you do that? Well, they never knew what it was like growing up, in the 60s and 70s, right? But here's the interesting thing about that law. That court case was in 1984. That ruling expired in 1988. We are no longer bound by that, and we haven't been bound by that for decades. And let me tell you something, guys. Anytime that you start something by dividing Americans up by the color of their skin, it doesn't matter why you're doing it. It doesn't matter how true in your heart you are or what your good intentions are. When we divide Americans by the color of their skin, we are doing the wrong thing, and we are in fact perpetuating racism. We're not doing anything that's going to stop it. Okay? The reality today is our politics is one of the most racist parts of society. Dividing us up. And I'll tell you what, anytime, this is a basic rule of life, anytime somebody's trying to divide you up from somebody else, they're probably not doing it in your best interest. I mean, anytime you see a wolf trying to cut one animal from the crowd, it's not in the best interest of that animal to cut from the pack. Right? That's a basic rule of the world. So when you hear people dividing us by color of skin, you know that that person does not have our collective best interests in mind. There is no longer a need for us to start our discussion with having a majority-minority district in District 3. Guys, everybody's, I'm totally respectful of whatever anybody else's faith model is. In my faith model, if you start with something that is that evil, don't expect God to prosper what you're doing, because He ain't going to do it. Okay? Now, more than ever, is the time for every Escambia County citizen to stand up and say no to the racism that is the division that drives this entire discussion. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you focus on, I don't care where the incumbent lives, and if you focus on maintaining the integrities of our neighborhoods, and you just start from that, the interesting thing that happens is you keep these neighborhoods down here together, and the African American community is still fairly well represented in District 3. You kind of end up with fairly similar results, except you're starting from a position of honor and something that you can actually stand before God and expect to be prospered for, as opposed to starting from a point of racism. Okay. Now here's the other problem that happens with that. If we have to start a discussion of our precincts and our districts in Escambia County with saying, got to have a maximum number of black folks in this district, we are literally disenfranchising everybody else. Okay? And it's kind of funny because, it's not funny, there's nothing funny about it at all. You go back and watch the video of our discussion, and we're moving the needle one street at a time and carving up neighborhoods and then counting the number of black and white votes. I'll be honest with you, I'm ashamed of the fact, and I went home and I told Wendy, I said, I am ashamed that I didn't know what to say. And believe it or not, I mean, if you know me at all, me being speechless is kind of rare. I didn't know how to insert myself into the conversation. How do you insert yourself into an inherently racist conversation, which the Navy never gave me that luxury, okay? You never, you didn't, from my entire time in the Navy, I didn't get to pick, to be in a black or white berthing area, or whether or not the guy working next to me in the spaces was black or white. It's just not part of our dialogue, right? So I just couldn't figure out how to get into and change that dialogue when we were having that conversation. And I'm a little bit ashamed of myself for not being able to figure that out. That was a challenge. That was a time when good men should have spoken up. But when you watch that video and you see commissioners moving the needle and then counting the number of black and white votes, it doesn't matter what your politics are, left, right, middle, up or down, that's wrong. Because it's just absolutely wrong. And the funny thing, the thing about it is, when I say what really is kind of shocking is, we act as though those are the only two races. And perhaps back in 1984, maybe that's all that was here. I don't know. But we have a fairly large Vietnamese population. We have an Asian population here in Escambia County. We have a alternative lifestyle population. We have a fairly large Hispanic population. None of this was addressed. So when we say majority minority, we really didn't address, even if we were attempting to address the minority issue, we didn't do it. Okay? That is the core business practice that created this map. And now is the time for Escambia County to stand up and say, we are not a racist county and we will not divide our county up by color. So when I got back from the trip and the first meeting had taken place and we came up with this map, thought, that's insane. I didn't think there was any possibility we'd go this route. And we talked about, what those business practices, what our decision-making points should be. And I actually had Connor Mann, my intern, go down to David Stafford's office with that guidance and start to draw out what a map could look like or should look like when you don't think about the incumbents. We're trying to kind of focus, trying to figure out to make sure that we weren't not necessarily driven by color, but making sure that we weren't inadvertently disenfranchising any group. That's a reasonable thing for any Christian, right? And the map that you see here that's referred to as the Underhill Proposed Districts, I hate that. Again, it's not about us. We're temporary stewards. So go ahead and put my name on it, sure. But the reality is, this map is where we could have gotten to. And you see that it actually condenses District 1, so it's a greater focus on the greater Beulah area. It brings in the precincts down here south of Lillian Highway that are already, quite frankly, those people are more associated with Perdido life than they are with Beulah life. So that made sense. We tried to work through the Myrtle Grove issue, but we really just kind of ran out of time. But this 99, Precinct 99 right here, those are Myrtle Grove folks. And they're always surprised when they go to the polls and their neighbor 2 blocks away has a different ballot than they do. Okay? But that could be addressed, that can be fixed if we just take some time to do it. But in order to fix it, we have to abandon this idea that we're going to start by carving up one district by skin color. Okay? So the right way for us to have done this would have been for us to have these town halls first. Okay? And I'll tell you, wasn't the chairman, wasn't the county administrator, probably should have been a little more emphatic about doing that, about driving that. Getting the board to move a different direction. There was all this pressure about, there's just not enough time, there's not enough time. There would have been plenty of time to have these. We turned I turned 3 town halls on, and I say I did it, actually Connor and Jonathan did it, but we turned 3 town halls on in a matter of a couple of hours, right? And we've knocked them all out this week. So we absolutely could have and should have come to you first and said what's important to you, okay? And personally, I wouldn't have even had the maps out yet. But just what's important to you? Because I guess it's a military strategy or planning way of doing things is what's commander's guidance? Well, who are the commanders in a representative democracy? You are. So we should have come to you and gotten commander's guidance. We should have come to you guys and done town halls and heard from you what was important to you in your districts and in your neighborhoods first, then taken that information and gone and done the hard work of carving up the map. That's the right way to have done it. We failed you. Okay? I personally feel like I failed. Okay? So the purpose of having these town halls is kind of twofold. I'll do a little bit of penance on that aspect and actually hear from you and give you an opportunity to speak on public record. We've got the ECTV going, so that gets you an opportunity to be on public record saying what you think we should be doing. Unfortunately, instead of giving us commander's guidance, what this gives you an opportunity to do is give us criticism of the work that we did, or if you like it, say so and say why. But it's important, no matter what you say, that we've had the opportunity for you to speak. Okay, so that's my goal really out of tonight. The other goal that I have for tonight is for those of you who believe that we're doing it wrong, to give you the mechanism to tell us that we're doing it wrong. And perhaps, and it's very reasonable, to just say, pump the brakes. When you get started off on a path and that path isn't working out, it's perfectly okay to say, take a step back, go back to what was right, and start over again. Okay? We do not have to, we are not required by law to redistrict before this next election. We are not required by law to redistrict in 21. Anybody who tells you we are is either misinformed or misinforming, or maybe even both. Okay? So we have 2 choices going into this next election cycle. The commission proposed districts, or the way we are right now. Now this isn't great, but this isn't even good. So it's a step in the wrong direction. We can very easily just go back to the Board of County Commissioners and say, guys, we took a best college try at it, but it's not ready, and we're not ready to commit to 10 years of this, and we need to go ahead and finish up this election cycle on the current map, and then take the time to do it right with the town halls, talking to the people, and you have the people's equities represented in the decision-making process. So with that, I'd be happy to I really do truly want to hear, and so, well, I guess a lot of folks here actually know Connor. You may know that when I hired Connor, in the interview, the first thing I said is, if you ever turn into a yes man, you're gone. Okay? And I know there's a couple of military guys here. You know that in the military, we surround ourselves with people who don't agree with us. Okay? Because the truth is the greatest act of loyalty, not agreeing with us. So I'm not looking for any of that kind of thing, but I am very interested in hearing y'all's opinions about where we are today and where we're trying to get to. Anybody want to go first? Nobody wants to go first. Go ahead.
What does it look like for the schools? Because I know, I'm sorry.
Come on up, Paul. So Paul Fetzko is the District 2 school board member. Paul is, if we do go with the proposed districts, Paul will remain in District 2. So he would not become your district representative. It's Mr. Adams that is the District 1. But on the matters of the school system, I'm kind of ignorant. So Paul, if you don't mind, even you were probably hoping to slink in the back and not be seen. Go ahead.
Actually, Doug, I wanted to be here because there have been questions at all of your town halls, and I couldn't be there at the first one because we had our board meeting that night. But last night there were questions, and if there were tonight, I didn't think that Mr. Adams would show up for this because a lot of people look at this as Doug's meeting. I want to say that there are differences in the school board and in the Board of County Commission. When we are elected by district, a voting district. But the minute we are sworn in, we take an oath that we serve every student within the district Escambia County. So I feel very comfortable being here tonight because I serve you and the students who attend the schools regardless of what voting district they are in. My career I spent most of my time in special education, and so I had my kids in every school in this Escambia County. I feel very comfortable going to Beulah. I feel comfortable going to Beulah Middle. I could go to Century, up to Northview, Pine Meadow, whatever. I've been there, I've worked in it, I know the people. But for this purpose, and I'm delaying, what happens with any of the redistricting for voting purposes means absolutely nothing to difference in the schools, okay? What we do in the school district is we have a school attendance zone for each school. We look at populations and the numbers and how many students can enroll and how many students the facility can handle, what their capacity is. So these lines, the voting lines, have nothing to do with it. The majority of students who go to Helen Cairo Elementary live in District 2, although the school resides in voting District 1, okay? That means nothing to anything that we do with the school district. There would be no changes in doing that. The only way we would change attendance zones is if, I hate to say this because Beulah is an example of it, if a school becomes so saturated with students that they don't have the capacity to serve them, then we are required by the state to rezone to schools that would be adjacent and have capacity. Now, that being said, it's kind of a moot point because this is a choice district. So you can still have choice to go to a different school. You can't choice into a school that's at capacity if you don't live in that school attendance zone. I'm confusing things, and I don't mean to do that. I really just want to keep it clean and simple. For purposes of these lines and what's going on with the proposed districts for the Board of County Commission, the school district will either adopt what the Board of County Commissioners is going to adopt, or we could do something different. We have already spoken as a school board to go along with what the Board of County Commissioners is going to do so that it will be clear for the constituents to know. If I'm in District 1 for the Board of County Commissioners, I'm in District 1 for the school board. In the past, there have been differences that you would have been in one district for commissioner and a different one for school board. And 10 years ago, when the decision was made by the then school board and Board of County Commissioners, along with the help of the supervisor of elections, to have those voting districts be the same. And so we want to continue to do that. Now, there is one other difference, and Doug was very right on what he said. They do not have to finish and redistrict for the Board of County Commissioners based on the new census data at this time, but we do. Okay, the school board must decide what lines we are going to use by the end of this calendar year. So we have already advertised the proposed districts, knowing that they have a meeting December 2nd, and this can change, or it could go back to the current, or it could be something totally different. But we had to advertise something so we have a starting point to go from. But we will make a decision on the school board on what our voting lines will be in December. Okay?
So, Paul, if the Board of County Commissioners on the 2nd of December decides it's been an awful lot of pushback, it's clear the people aren't real happy with this, we're going to go ahead and stick with this, then when you guys came together on the 14th of December, you would be able to say, we're going to go ahead and stick with this. And that wouldn't violate any rules, laws, anything.
No, we just have to have a decision made so long as you said earlier, and that was the first time I've heard it through this whole process, Doug, that we are not in violation of the caps with the current districts.
That's correct.
That's the first time I've heard that said. Now, It was my understanding that we had to do something because those numbers are not where they want it to be. After the last census, what has been given to us was that each district of the 5 districts should have about 64,000 people in each one, and some of them are out. At this point, District 2 has about 62. I think District 4 has 66.
Yeah.
There are disparities. And so making these changes could correct that, but if we're not in violation, then we most likely, no, I shouldn't say that. I have no idea what anybody else would do. I just know that it's a possibility to stick with the current one if we are not in violation of what those numbers are.
Great.
But the school board will have something decided at our December board meeting. And again, it makes no difference on anything with your students or children or what schools they attend or what have you there. But I want to re-emphasize, a lot of times people say, well, I represent the schools in District 2, or I represent the schools in District 3, or I represent the schools in Escambia County. And that's what every school board member needs to say and to be really aware of. Yes, they reside and they were voted by a certain district, but once you take the oath, you represent every school and every child in this entire school district, not in a voting district.
Did that answer your question? All right,
It was
outstanding.
probably more than you ever wanted. I'm sorry.
Well, when you ask how long you've been an educator,
Yes.
right? We all know where that sentence goes, right? But here's, so I've lived on, when we moved here, we lived off of Gulf Beach Highway. We live out on the Key now. My kids went to Helen Caro for elementary school, and that was the last time that they ever went to school, even close to our school, right? So Helen Caro is close to our district. Helen Caro is in District 1. So from the very get-go, they did not go to school in our district. They then had them go. They both went to Brown Barge, which if you ever have a chance to get your kids in Brown Barge, go for it. It's the best education possible. And then I had one go to Pine Forest High, and one went to Washington, right? So all the way up by the mall, right? So that that school choice and giving those being able to go to the academies that were of their choice. Kids always going to study harder a little bit harder anyway, when it's something that they want to study. So again, where these schools are located physically, thank God, right? It's about the only part of our lives left that isn't based on politics. But there really is no politics in the location of those schools. And I've never met a school board member who referred to a particular school as theirs and not another school as equally theirs. So, Paul, I think that says a lot for where our school board is at. In all my, like I said, raising 2 kids up here in Escambia County school system, I've never heard any discussion of the politics of the county inside the school system. So, anybody else?
If I may. Okay, to piggyback off what Mr. Fesco was saying.
Connor, you're not supposed to outdress your boss.
Our current map is in compliance because when you look at the census data, it cannot be over 5% in each district. So let's say, I think currently it is around 62,000 people in District 2. And I believe District 1 has about 66. That's edging at about a 4.6% when you add them all up and divide it. It's about a 4.6 difference, which is the same with this map. I don't know off the top of my head the difference with this map percent-wise. But since it's 4.6, it's within a 5% change, which means we can still keep this map. Our county attorney recommended, as well as the school board attorney recommended, that we go ahead and do the redistricting process to clean up that percentage and hopefully lower it. The only 2 districts that were a little top heavy after the census data was District 5 in yellow and District 1 in blue. So if you want, you can go back to the meetings. The first joint meeting was October the 5th. That was the first joint school board and county commission redistricting meeting. The second one was November 2nd. You can look at how they did the math. They worked with the supervisor of elections office. They got all their math done, and they created this proposed plan. However, I would encourage you to look at the numbers of all of these plans individually and make your own educated decision on which plan that you prefer.
Hey, Connor, I have a question for you. So you said that on the commissioner's proposed districts, districts 1 and 5 are still the heavy districts?
Yes, especially District 1.
Okay, so think
Now,
about,
I will say, excuse me, on the District 5, 88 cleaned it up. So they're perfect where they need to be. But the top heavy one here would be District 1.
so does anybody believe that that in the next 10 years, the period of time that this redistricting would be in effect, that Beulah area, District 1, is not going to be experiencing heavy growth? So we know it's going to be experiencing heavy growth. You know that's going to be happening over the next 10 years. If you're truly thinking about this strategically and you're thinking about it long-term consequences of decisions today, you would actually redistrict 1 and 5 to be the smaller of the 5, with the realistic expectation that there's going to be an inordinate amount of growth in those two districts compared to the other 3. Look, here's the thing. Southwest sector, everything that's not swampland has already been built on, just about. There's very little area left out there for continued growth. Okay, District 4 in the city, same thing. District 3 in the city. Now you're starting to see some higher density stuff going in as people are kind of changing the way they live and people want to live, work, play all in the same place. So it's reasonable to think there's going to be some growth there. But I don't think any rational person believes that District 2, 3, and 4 are going to be growing at the same rate as District 1 and 5 over the next 10 years. And you don't even have to do fantasy math on this. You just go look. It's going to be depressing, but go and look at how many houses have already been permitted for construction. Never mind just the ones you already see under construction, but how many houses have already been permitted for construction in District 1 and District 5. And you can roughly assume that those houses are going to be filled with people within the next 10 years. That's where your growth is going to be. So if you're truly looking at balancing, you would make sure that that today's District 1 and District 5 are smaller than the other districts so that they balance out over the course of the 10 years. And you know what? If you did that would happen, that would make the Beulah equities even more intense to the people who have to run for office here. So that's good for Beulah today and good for Beulah tomorrow. Yes, ma'am.
You answered her question.
Oh, wow, that's pretty good. Predictive. Okay, anybody else? Got one in the back and then we'll come to you.
I just don't think, the plan they proposed, like you said, it's two different. Beulah is not anywhere similar to Perdido as far as concerns. It's just about, I think certain people want to have control over Perdido for money reasons or to power or whatever they want, certain commissioner. Taking away part of your area, it just leaves you with hardly nothing anymore. And especially the fact that you live over there. So now it screws you.
It certainly does as a citizen. I made a promise 7 years ago that I would run for no more than 2 terms, and unlike almost every other politician who says that, I'm actually living up to it. My wife has made sure that happens. So yeah, it doesn't affect me as a politician, but again, we should not concern ourselves with what affects politicians. Quite frankly, we've got it good enough. We don't need to bend the rules or write the rules in a way that's good for us. But here's the thing about Perdido. Okay, I ran on a basis of smart development for Perdido Key, focusing on Perdido Key as the equity holders being the people who own and live on the island, the people who own and live near Perdido, because that's kind of our neighborhood, right? So even if you're not on the island, but still. And then the third equity holder is everybody on the west side that's our beach. right? As you get more and more people here in Beulah, where do you go to put your boat in? Okay, if you used to go down to Galvez Landing, you probably don't go there anymore, because if you're not there by the time the sun comes up, there's not going to be a place to park your trailer. Okay, so the new ramp that's going to go in at Heron Bayou should have gone in 5 years ago, right? If we allow more and more development on this island, every bit of development that takes place on Perdido Key, and Perdido Key is the beach for the west side, right? The more development that we allow there, the less access there is for you. The less access there is for Myrtle Grove, for Warrington, for the people who they grew up going out there and it's already, I mean, believe me, we like I said when I started, we really took it in the shorts 20 years ago with the development that happened out there. It really affected our lifestyle, right? It affected the access to the island for Escambia County citizens. Now, I've got a lot of friends and quite a lot of supporters that are in the tourism business. And I always tell them from the very first time that I ran for office, the tourism industry is not my equity. Okay? My equity is the citizens who live here. But, tourism industry, what we know is if you build the community you want to live in, people are going to flock to it. Your industry is going to do just fine if we just build the kind of place that we want to live in. Okay? And that's been true, right? That's been the model for our tourism development out there for the last 7 years. If we end up with a commissioner who is a build guy, and we start back into where we were 10 years ago with trying to build a bingo parlor, casino, and make it all into a resort and stuff, okay, at $250 a night, that ain't your place anymore. It ain't my place for sure. And that's what they wanted to do. So if we get back into that mentality, every time we build more tourist stuff on that island, what we're telling you as a local is, you're really not welcome here. So, yes, sir. Did you have a comment?
I just wanted to express my opinion about the whole effort that's going on. I think probably more than the average bear, I'm sort of more cognizant of what's going on with the county commission. But this one really caught me off guard when I heard what you said, that we didn't really have to be doing this redistricting. Like everybody else who knows about it, I have my own parochial vested interests. How is it going to impact me and the people who live around me? That's the first thing I thought about. How is it going to impact our ability to vote in the next election, to get somebody to represent us properly? That and many other questions. It irks me to see a proposal that dilutes the probability of those things going in a positive direction. And I'm certainly aware that there are a lot more complex issues to be dealt with on a daily basis on Perdido Key. And there's a lot more complex issues to be dealt with on a daily basis here in Beulah. Why in the heck do we want to bundle those together? What good is somebody voting down in Perdido Key going to help represent where I live? You hit it on the head in so many directions with what you talked about. And I truly appreciate that you're making this a public thing. I wish the whole business had been presented just like this from the very beginning, months ago. And I hope that somehow we can drag this to a screeching halt until cooler heads or more common sense prevails. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. That really should be the objective of the people right now, right? Bring it to a screeching halt. We are not out of compliance. There is no reason to rush into doing something that's going to end up being worse. The doctors always say their first rule is first do no harm. We should have that same rule in government, right? And for the most part, in my opinion, the government that governs the least governs the best. So if you don't have to do something that has such an impact on Perdido and Beulah, then why would you do it? When we have the ability to get right with the law, we're already right with the law, and we're able to continue to stay right with the law by simply taking the time through 2022 into 2023, because you have to redistrict in an odd year so that it doesn't affect the elections that are going on that year. We can get this wrong in 21, or we can get it right in 23. Yeah, when it's a 10-year impact, it kind of makes sense to get it right in 23. Yes, sir.
I am strongly against the current proposal and the one that they're going to propose now. First of all, that is a big district going down there toward Perdido Key. And a county commissioner cannot attend and see to all the different sections down there. And he cannot do the resources down that far. Now you take up here where I live on Tower Bridge Road. Ever since Navy Federal came in up here, we have had an influx of homes where you wouldn't believe. On my road that I live on, Tower Ridge, there wasn't very many houses on that. In fact, there used to be people that had horses there, chickens, cows. Right beside me, there's over 100 houses going in, which are no more than 15 feet apart, going down the hill. And where you come in on from Mobile Highway to Beulah Road, right there at the tower, there's another big place of houses there. And down the road, you go down toward Hearst Hammond, there's just tons of houses down, hundreds of them. And I think that we're just getting too much up here, too many houses up here. And I think something ought to be done about it.
Well,
Because we won't have the infrastructure. We have dump trucks that go by our house every 15 minutes, hauling dirt in there to where that housing project is.
so there's, I would caution you to always be careful about a politician who tells you he's going to stop all that building, okay? Because that's just not possible. Okay, that's a campaign speech he's never going to be able to live up to. But what you can do in political office is you can have a set of rules that applies to your county that makes for smart development, that ensures that the developer has to pay the impact of his development on your community, okay? And then the get-rich-quick kind of, because every one of those neighborhoods you just described is probably an LLC, and as soon as that builder's done with it, they're going to hand it over to the homeowners association and walk away. It's a horrible business practice, and one we shouldn't allow, we don't have to allow. If our builders were held accountable for what they do to our communities, the good and the bad, they do the good and they're able to profit from that, and they should, because this is America, but they have to be held accountable to the impacts as well. And a county commissioner that's focused on that would be able to curtail the sprawl development and ensure that the development that you get has the infrastructure that goes along with it. You can make the developer pay that impact, and they'll always tell you, well, now wait a minute, if you do that, that's just going to drive up the average cost of homes. Or it'll drive down the profit margin of the developer. Okay? If it drives the cost of homes up too high, then they're not going to sell. It's kind of it's a hollow comment, right? It's one that it sounds right, but then the more you think about it, it's kind of silly. There's no reason that those developers couldn't be required to take into consideration and pay for the impact they have on the greater community. Now here's an interesting thing about this sprawl that's taking place. It's bad for you in Beulah, but it's also bad for everybody else. Because our laws make it so easy to take a horse farm like you're talking about and turn it into a whole bunch of cookie cutter houses on postage stamp sized lots, because it's so easy to do that, there's no incentive at all for our developers to redevelop and do infill development in our poorer parts of town. It's just so easy to go ahead and just bulldoze all the trees and the pasture land, bring in a bunch of red clay and build a bunch of houses. We don't have to make it that easy for them. And if it was harder to do that, then more of our developers would be focused on tearing down the old decrepit infill products down here in the center. Okay? So this thing we're doing that allows and really kind of promotes sprawl, it's not good for anybody except the developer and his bottom line. And it leaves us with a whole bunch of disjointed neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks, strangely enough. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you for your service. 30 years in the Navy, that's outstanding.
People always say thank you for your service, and I'm like, I know what a punk I was at 18.
Well,
The
my
Navy
dad
was
was in
really
the
good to me.
My dad was in the Navy as well. And also, thank you for spending a Friday night with us. I can't remember our current county commissioner ever doing one of these, except for when he came to our neighborhood watch. We represent Bellevue. And when he came to our neighborhood watch, when he was trying to win the first time, you know, he does what most politicians do, no offense, and that's, you know, sell you what you want to hear. And then when he gets elected, nothing happens. If we have to change districts, which I didn't know that we didn't have to by the end of the year, but if we did, I like your plan the best. And I wrote an email in, you know, just saying if we have to, I agree with Underhill. And I got a nice little email back from a certain county commissioner, and I thought it was kind of unethical of what was said in the email. I don't know if you want me to share it, but
It's your time.
okay, I'll read it.
I'll be happy to speak to any accusations made about me.
Okay.
So,
I don't think
I owe
it's-
you that.
After hearing you tonight, I think it's, you know, all this was just wrong what he said. It says, "Thanks for sending your email to my office concerning your opinion about the upcoming redistricting vote. I did not want to rush the redistricting process, as I know it is a process that typically takes 6 months to do properly. I voiced the rational opinion that we wait until we are next statutorily permitted to make this change in 2023, to take the time necessary to conduct hearings and public input sessions so we could do the task properly without upending the current election and rushing. As a school board member in 2011, I was part of the last redistricting, the only member of the BCC who has done this previously, and knew firsthand that to rush in 2 months was not wise. Nevertheless, Commissioner Underhill was vocal and boisterously against waiting, and he pushed the board on his issue. He pressed for us to complete it in rushed fashion in 2021. On October 5th, all 5 school board members, 1 via Zoom due to a travel conflict, and 4 of the Escambia commissioners held our first joint meeting to work on the maps in the compressed time frame. Notably, Commissioner Underhill of District 2, Perdido Key, blew the meeting off and pulled a no-show. Apparently, he was busy at an out-of-state jet ski race where he was a spectator. Yet he didn't bring forward a map for our consideration before he left, and he didn't bother to zoom into the meeting, which he spelt wrong, either from the race. Between October's first meeting and last Tuesday, Commissioner Underhill didn't bother to send forward a map to the board. Crickets from him. On Tuesday of this past week, on November 2nd, the school board and county commission held our second and final meeting to develop our draft final for advertising so we can complete this task before the end of the year. Commissioner Underhill attended this meeting, and he brought forward an unworkable map that received support from not one person on the, I don't know what DAIS.
The dais.
Well, thank you, other than himself. It was a map that left District 1 5,000 plus short on population, knocked the existing ECUA District 1 board member out of her seat less than 1 year after her election, kept Myrtle Grove split between 2 districts, which I didn't know it was, and totally unbalanced the number of schools between School Board District 1 and District 2. It was not a map anyone could seriously consider. It was a last-minute, ill-conceived, and frankly, a day late and a dollar short.
Okay.
There's-
So let's go ahead. It's kind of interesting how this email starts. The writer, the author of this email, believes that we shouldn't have done this year.
Yeah,
Okay.
but yet they
I
want to
believed
rush
we
it.
could.
Yeah.
I certainly believed we could. And we could have had, I mean, I've done 3 town halls this week. We could have easily done that back in October. We could have actually done the town halls and heard from you what your equities were before we even got the numbers. Right? And again, mea culpa, as I started this meeting, mea culpa. I should have pushed harder for that. Okay? So if it was right, if the author of this email believes that was what was right 90 days ago, why isn't that still right today? I think that's a compelling argument. Yep. I thought we could. I was wrong. If this is the work product, then I was clearly wrong. And I'll be happy to admit that he was right. We can't. Because, you know, if you say you can or you say you can't, either way you're right. We could have, but we didn't. So here we are today. Very strong, compelling argument in the first part of that email for going ahead and sticking with this and coming back and hitting it in 23. So there's something where the author and I are in complete agreement on. That's 2 votes. We only need 1 more. So work on the other commissioners and get us that 1 more. I spoke to the issue with the jet ski racing. Yes, I recognize it's a very non-traditional sport. Believe me, I wish my kid was into travel baseball. It would have been a whole lot cheaper. Unfortunately, that's what he's a world finalist at. And so, yeah, I'll never apologize for being with my kids first. Here's the other interesting thing about it. Everybody at the county offices knows, because Brett's been in the newspaper for 6 years as a professional jet ski racer. Everybody knew I was going to be out of Lake Havasu. Anybody who says they didn't, that down there, completely wrong. And so, other interesting points there. We talked about incumbents. Well, I've already told you, I don't think incumbents are all that important. I don't think I'm that important. Okay? I know I'm in the minority on that. I'm in the minority downtown. But I bet if we polled that here in Beulah, I'd be in the pretty strong majority. And if we polled that anywhere else in Escambia County, citizens would tell you, you guys, you like your titles and you like your big leather chairs up there, but you're just not that important. And you're right. Okay? So I'm very much in the majority on that among the people. I'd pretty much take that to the bank. I know because people always tell me when I'm at Harbor Freight or anywhere else that that's the case. He also addressed the schools. We're moving schools from this precinct to that precinct, to this district to that district. Guys, you heard it yourself. School board from the District 2 school board member, that he's District 2 on election day, he's Escambia County on swear-in day. Okay, so again, an irrelevant talking point. A talking point that should never have factored into our discussions. Okay, so appreciate you reading it. Again, this doesn't have to be that political. Believe it or not, as soon as I walk out of this meeting, I'm just going back to being Doug. And I'll have this jacket off by the time I get to my car.
I just thought it was poor taste that,
Well,
you know,
here's the
it's
thing.
just-
Anytime that we start adding emotion in, politics is already emotional enough, right? Shouldn't we, as the elected officials, be the ones extracting the emotion out? Shouldn't we be the ones cooling it down, cooling down the rhetoric? That's how I grew up. I guess looking around the country, maybe, it's not how we are, but I'd rather be the outlier on that than be a part of that. So, all right, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Based on the boondoggle that we had with OLF 8, how can we take control back and get the county commissioners to do what we want done instead of what is going to pad their wallets?
Well, boondoggle you had with OLF 8. So, interesting, right? If you're in a community that is experiencing incredible rapid growth and everybody's really kind of struggling from all this growth that's happening, but you've got 640 acres that can't be built on, why on earth would you make that available to be built on? It was the only protected part of Beulah. Why not just let it ride for 20 years and find out what else is happening. Now that property is available for development just like every other square inch of Beulah. So it's an insane kind of thing. So, but you mentioned, and it's easy to be pessimistic, right? It's easy to feel like, well, you know, why even go to a town hall? Those commissioners are going to do whatever the heck they want anyway. It's real easy to be pessimistic. But think about, let's take a look at the OLF8 thing. OLF8, you were told during the first election, you were told that, you know, they're wanting to do a master plan, and if you do a master plan, I think with the storyline that I heard was they're not going to let you burn your trash in your backyard. That's not what master planning is. If you do a master plan, they're going to take away your property rights. That's not what master planning is. In fact, it preserves property rights. Okay? We got a master plan on Perdido Key. In fact, the guy that was in office before me hired DPZ. We hired DPZ, and actually the citizens of Perdido paid for half of it the first time. Hired DPZ. He tried to put his thumb on the scale, and as soon as DPZ wouldn't, you know, push back on him, he actually fired them. That's what I ran on. I said, I'm going to bring back DPZ, and I'm going to bring back the master plan, and I'm going to make it law. And we did, right? So what happened? Citizens pushed back. Well, what happened up here? It was supposed to be an industrial park. I'm sorry, we're not supposed to call it an industrial park, Connor. What's the catch term that they used?
Commerce Park.
A commerce park. It was going to be an industrial park. Okay. Now, why you would build an industrial park in Beulah when we've got a massive industrial park that used to be a Superfund site downtown? Superfund site, all cleaned up, federal dollars, all cleaned up. It's ready to go. It's got gas. It's got 3-phase power. It's got rail. It's got everything except one thing. It ain't got no jobs in it. If you've got that sitting down there empty, why would you build another one to compete with it out here? Okay, it was a bad idea. Citizens of Beulah stood up, demanded a master plan. You kind of got one, a little bit of finger on the scale on it because of the very powerful donors that pushed this thing for 25 years. But the pushing back, it might not have been 100% victory, but the pushing back gave you something. Okay? It gave you, well, first of all, pushing back is just the American way, right? So it's better than sitting down. I'd rather take a punch standing up than take a kick sitting down. Beulah stood up and forced it to go more toward the idea of the amenities that the people who are already here need. Okay? You shouldn't have to drive, 20 minutes to get to a restaurant. Okay? So you guys actually did a good job. What you saw is a community stand up and say, we want something else, and to some extent you got it. Is it 100% victory? No, there's no such thing as 100% victory, at least not in the first round. We did the same thing in Perdido 20 years ago. We got a partial victory up front, we changed our commissioner, came back, and we got a 100% victory on our Perdido Key master plan. Interestingly enough, 4 years later when they ran against me, nobody was willing to talk about doing away with the master plan because it was so popular once we put it in place. So we did, I think that you apply that same rule. Every one of your friends, everybody in this room needs to send emails to all of the other commissioners saying that this is unpopular. And all you have to do is stop. You don't even have to do anything. You don't have to do the Underhill plan or the commission proposed plan or anything else. You just have to stop doing the wrong thing. Doing the right thing starts with stop doing the wrong thing, right? Anybody who's been in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That's how it starts. You start by stop doing the wrong thing. If you're tired of having to deal with the gunshot wound to your foot, put the gun away. Okay? You have the chance to do that now, right? Every single person here has at least 5 or 6 friends at home that you can go to and talk to and get them to communicate with the other commissioners. It sounds like the author of this email already believes that the right thing to do was to put this off to 23. Let's remind him of that. It's his own words. It's very well articulated in there. So that's 2, and all we need is 1 more to just stick with this until 2023. That's the play. That's the smart move. I think that's what's good for us today. It's what's good for Beulah and Perdido for the next 10 years. Anybody else? Charles, want to go ahead?
Yes, I'm Charles Krupnick.
Charles, could you take the...
Oh, thanks. Yes, I'm Charles Krupnick, and I'm the president of the Perdido Key Association. So my equities are totally Perdido Key, so I'm sorry I can't represent Beulah or talk to your equities, other than to say, yeah, I don't think we should be shared. You know, you have a lot going on, as the commissioner has pointed out. But more specifically, there's just no reason to add Perdido Key to District 1. And the reasons given are what? That it was there before 2000. That's history. That's not a reason. Another one given is that it kind of smooths out the western border of Escambia County. Oh, so what? You know. The other, that Commissioner Underhill wasn't at the first joint meeting of the county commissioners and school board. It's not as if there hadn't been discussion prior to that at previous meetings. Everybody knew that he wasn't going to approve of having Perdido Key leave District 2. You know, and then I've been to 3 of the last 4 meetings where these kind of things were discussed, and I've spoken in front of the commission. And you know, this last time, I very specifically asked, not Commissioner Burgash, you know, he wants Perdido Key. I guess I can respect that and expect it. I don't approve, but it's understandable because it's a pretty valuable asset. But I look at the other commissioners and I say, why are you approving this? And I get no answers. You know, I mean, there are no answers. There is no good reason. It is a land grab, okay? And it needs to be recognized as such. And it's very disappointing and that we're this far along without a lot of discussion, pushback. You know, I've been at the meeting. You don't have any citizens at the commission meeting arguing for it. You know, some of us are there arguing against it. So I just hope that through the commissioner's efforts, both here and the 2 other town meetings that he's had, some of the other things that have gone on, that we can get enough mobilization of public support to stop this. It's not going to be easy, okay? And this is December 2nd coming up very quickly. So, thank you.
Thanks. Charles, interesting, some of the comment there that, you know, a politician should always be able to explain quickly, clearly, and succinctly why for anything. If they ever try to tell you, well, you know, it's really complex, they're just setting you up for an untrue story. Because everything that's complex is actually just a conglomeration of a whole bunch of simple things, right? There really is nothing. If it's too complex for you to explain as a politician, you're on the wrong side of the equation, right? I was a counterterrorism officer for 20 years before I shifted over into cyber. I spent a lot of time over in the Middle East doing at the height of the global war on terror, doing some things that that still make my head spin. I had an ethical standard over there where nobody can see what I'm doing, and it was this. My kids were 8 and 10 at the time. I said, I will never do anything that I cannot explain to my kids in front of their mother. If you can't explain it in very clear terms why you're doing something, then you are doing the wrong thing. So, you're right, Charles. Nobody can explain in clear, succinct terms anything that makes sense about why we're on such a journey to do this. I want to talk about that part about me not being there. It is a long-standing policy of our board, unwritten policy, but very well proven over a long period of time, that when the commissioner from that district isn't there, you don't do anything radical in that district. We have often kicked issues, and you'll hear us say it'll come up, but Commissioner May is off at a basketball thing. He coaches a lot of kids basketball, so sometimes he misses. If something comes up in Commissioner May's district, we'll ask the administrator, has Commissioner May expressed an interest about this issue? And if the administrator doesn't clearly say, Commissioner May supports this, we just push it to the next question is there any risk if we push it to the next meeting? And if the administrator says no, it gets pushed to the next meeting. Why? If that's our policy, so clearly defined over many, many years, is my absence an excuse to do something radical like this? Just doesn't make any sense. Certainly isn't congenial. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Rex Jensen. I live in District 1. I live down by the dog track, and I've got some concerns about what's going on where the dog track used to be. They're building 125 homes directly behind my house, and going to be runoff issues, and I'm concerned about flooding. I have some experience in that regard, not as being flooded, but I worked for a federal agency that you all know for 25 years. My point, 2 points, and then I'll be quiet. I've gone to all 3 of these meetings, and Mr. Underhill has been absolutely dead on with the same thing at each meeting, saying the same thing to everybody. I came to watch, he's a politician, right? But I don't think that's a dirty word necessarily, but he has been saying the same thing. The meeting last night in Perdido Key was heavily attended, very interested people, and I'm kind of surprised that the commissioner in this district wants those people to be after his hide, quite frankly. Just to add a little bit to what Mr. Underhill said about you're all force multipliers, do write to your county officials. I'm interested in Escambia County. I've got some things in my neighborhood I talked to my commissioner about, but I am interested in what's right for the county and what's happening, or not just my part of the county. What's happening up here is sinful. It's just uncontrolled, and he's absolutely right. It's about the developers. It's about making money. I've had a commissioner say to me that we're trying to build affordable houses. Are you seeing any affordable houses in the neighborhood? If they're starting at $280,000 or $300,000, we've got to, the people that work in the gas stations and whatever like that, they've got to have someplace to live. They absolutely do. But write to your commissioners on anything going forward. Don't just sit and mumble amongst yourselves. That's a mistake. You've got to let them know, and if they think that they're out of step with what the voters think, you're going to see something happen. They won't just ram it through unless they really think they're right, and I've seen that in my childhood. We had some people that had the right idea, voters put them right out because they tried so hard. Voters put them out because the convention center was built, and it turns out they were right, but they believed in it so much they were willing to risk their job, and the voters were wrong and they were right. Financially, it was a huge success, but they were all unemployed looking for something else. Thank you very much for your time, Doug.
Thanks, appreciate that. So y'all really had a hard time in your last election because of COVID. Wasn't a whole lot of door knocking. Certainly wasn't going to be any getting together and having a debate on the issues. You really didn't have much of a election season because of COVID. In a couple of years, you're going to have another election season. Do you honestly believe it is in Beulah's best interest if the drama and the fight between Perdido Key interests and Beulah interests is driving your election season? Because I guarantee you it will. Perdido Key is kind of an interesting place. Perdido Key Association is the association of all the property owners out there, many of whom, well, historically, many of whom didn't live there, but since COVID, if you had a chance of being locked in Atlanta or locked in Perdido Key, guess what they chose? They all moved down, and so we actually have a huge population there since COVID started of our previously non-resident owners moving into their condos. If all of that is added to your next election cycle, which, by the way, is going to be a critically important election cycle, because by then, OLF 8 is going to look just about like it does right now. Okay? So there's not going to be a whole lot, just the reality of where our economy is going and whatnot. Your next election cycle, you have an amazing opportunity, if you don't like the direction it's gone so far, to correct it. That election cycle should be about Beulah and specifically about OLF 8. It should be about curtailing what development is going to look like, what smart development for Beulah looks like, and specifically what you're going to do with OLF 8. That's what that election needs to be about, and you need to really pin every candidate down to that. But if they're able to go to Perdido Key for votes and money and go divide Beulah versus Perdido Key, actually, politically speaking, it's really smart. Right? If you're all about the division game of politics, because if you're about the division game of politics, all you need to do is get 50% plus one, And as long as you can make sure that you keep your 50% plus one satisfied with whatever handouts or whatever promises need be, you really don't have to carry about the 49 or 50% minus one. Okay? You do not want to have the next cycle of Beulah elections all filled up with Perdido Key money and Perdido Key equities. It's not good for Beulah, and it's not good for Perdido Key. And it's darn sure not good for Escambia County. Okay? Because here's the interesting thing about it, right? We all get elected. We got 3 commissioners who are predominantly rural and 2 commissioners who are predominantly city. Why is it everything seems to go the city's way? You think about that, right? It seems like, I mean, because once we get down, if it was up to me, the county seat would not be on Palafox. It would be out here somewhere out in the county. Okay? Because once you go down there, all those restaurants up and down Palafox, that's where all of their equities take us for lunch. And it's crap. Okay? One of the things that I thought through with the plan was, hey, okay, so we've got a fairly big city and then we've got all the county. The city on this plan is only represented by 2 commissioners. The other 3 commissioners have no voters inside the city limits. That separates county equities from city equities. Now, I'm not anti-Pensacola. I love going down there. Used to love it a lot more. Okay, but that's not where I go. I live on Perdido Key, so when I go to the movies, I don't go downtown. I don't go into the city. I go over to Orange Beach. Okay? Our equities and the way we live out in Perdido is very different than downtown. The west side, everything on the west side of Bayou Chico has very different equities. My district, now it's kind of interesting, right? You look at this really funny little sliver that runs through here. District 2, at the last time that we did this, the District 2 commissioner had a house right there. And so these little downtown, super special precincts downtown, part of District 2, just for his personal edification. Okay? The reality is downtown's got plenty of interest and plenty of representation. It doesn't need your commissioner representing downtown equities. Okay? So I think that a plan that has the 2 city commissioners, it actually works out fairly good politically. I'm a hardcore Republican, but I am absolutely not a partisan. Okay? I would not prefer, some people would prefer a crappy Republican over a good Democrat. Not me. Okay? The truth about the city politics is it's very liberal compared to the rest of the county. So this plan, you've got 1 predominantly Democrat area and 1 predominantly Republican area representing the 2 city precincts. Well, that actually makes a lot of sense. And let them scrap it out over city issues. Because the reality is city issues don't affect us that much. They certainly don't affect us out in Myrtle Grove. They don't affect us out in Perdido Key. I suspect they don't affect us very much up here in Beulah. Okay? And if all the money keeps going downtown into downtown interests, and I guarantee you that OLF8, that wasn't a Beulah interest, that was a downtown interest. Driven very much by Mr. Cronley, who it was his swan song of his political activism. I refer to it as Cronley Park. So we need to have in this county 3 commissioners who have no equities inside the city. Then you've got a balance on your county government focused on the equities for us that live out here in the county. Interestingly enough, I left my house right here on your little maps. It has a little white star because to somebody the incumbent's resident matters. I left my house to come up here. It took me 47 minutes to get here. 47 minutes to get from here up to the heart of Beulah, right? Now, when I shop at Harbor Freight and drive up to our farm, which is actually off this map, so from Harbor Freight to our farm, which is about a mile south of Atmore, takes me 25 minutes. Takes me half as long to get across District 5 as it does to get across a part of the proposed District 1. Again, if somebody can explain that to me, let's hear it. But I'm pretty sure you're going to have a hard time explaining that in anything other than some of those ideas that you heard about, well, that's how it was 20 years ago or whatever else. All right, anybody else? I better stop before I get fired up because there's a part of it that's just, I do my best to not get emotional about it, but I do live here, I wasn't born in Escambia County. Only some people get that. But my baby was born in Escambia County. My son got his Eagle Scout in Escambia County. We go to church in Escambia County. So, yeah, wasn't blessed enough to be born here, but I darn sure got here as quick as the Navy would let me. And when I came here, actually 30 years ago, when I came here for aircrew school, I became a Florida resident. Now, not for the most noble of reasons, right? Every military man knows it. Once you get stationed in Florida, you become a Florida resident because we're one of the few states that believes in liberty enough not to tax your income. So, yeah, so it bothers me to no end that we want to continue to carve up and sell what we have been blessed with. I believe, and you hear me use the word stewardship all the time, especially with regard to Perdido Key. We've got a stewardship responsibility. If you've raised a kid, you know the minute you looked at that baby, you were like, oh my gosh, everything's changed now. I thought I knew something, and now, God, I am scared to death because you recognize you are a steward of something that is way more important than you. I talk about stewardship all the time because really, we've been blessed with something that places like Destin and Orange Beach also got blessed with, and they screwed it up. So when I'm talking about Perdido Key, I'm going to get a little bit fired up about it because we have managed to be good stewards in spite of all of the efforts of the condo developers. Now, as I said, don't ever trust somebody who says he's going to stop the building. But for 7 years on Perdido Key, only one condo has been permitted on that island. 7 years, one condo. And that was just like earlier this year, Jonathan. It was this year. I mean, now how did we do that? We didn't violate anybody's personal property rights. And of course, somebody's always going to jump in and say, well, you're trying to violate and take away personal property rights. No, we didn't. Not a single lawsuit of us saying that we were violating somebody's rights. And trust me, in this world, if we were, we'd have been sued. You'd have heard about it in the news. Not a single one of those. Now, what we have seen built out there is quite a bit of single-family homes. What we have seen is a lot of things that were built as vacation by owner or as income-producing property now have the owner living in them because we changed and focused on quality of place. You know, Beulah is a whole lot different than Perdido, but the principles of you first are just as true here as they were in Perdido Key 7 years ago, and we've demonstrated that if your commissioner is focused on that, you can make a difference. How do we focus our commissioners on that? Make sure that you contact them. I honestly believe that my commissioner peers want to do the right thing. I honestly believe that. I have a principal at work. I run a cyber crew up on NAS, and I have a principal at work, as cyber people, not exactly the most human interactive types, right? So they kind of have conflicts. The rule up there is we always assume noble intent. No matter how much somebody upsets you or angers you, dude, you got to assume noble intent. Because they come to me, Doug, you know what so-and-so said? Assume noble intent. He may have said something stupid or something that hurt your feelings. Assume noble intent because he's a teammate of yours. I try to do the same thing with regard to my peers on the board. I do believe that they want to do the right thing. They will do the right thing if enough citizens remind them that the right thing is exactly what was articulated in the first half of that email, and that is to stick with our current districts through this election cycle and then take time to come and talk to you first for a intelligent redistricting in 2023. How do we get there? Everybody walks out of here and says, that's pretty good stuff, goes home, grabs a beer, whatever, does nothing, nothing's going to change. You go home from here, you contact 3 to 5 of your friends, you make sure those emails go out to all the commissioners. If you're capable of doing it, write a letter to the editor at the PNJ. Talk to WAR, talk to anybody else that you can to just say, hey, pump the brakes. All we got to do is stick with this because it's fully compliant with the law and it gives us time to get it right the first time. If you don't have time to do it right the first time, we all know this drill, right? We've all taught it to our kids. If you don't have time to do it right the first time, where are you going to find the time to do it right the second time? So that's what I'd like to leave you with. If there are any other comments that anybody wants to make, floor's wide open. So guys, thanks for your time. I really appreciate you coming out. It's Friday night. Didn't expect to have a whole lot of people on Friday night, but I really do appreciate that you came out. Thanks.